Hello, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitsu Lab. This is my cat Catson who's decided to join me because today I'm going to be talking about soft skills. Now, soft skills are the skills of de-escalation, they're the skills of avoidance, awareness, the law, all of the things that really aren't a physical hard skill of conflict. And I don't spend a huge amount of time talking about them on my channel or on my videos. And the main reason for that is when I started doing these videos, they were really just to pass the time during lockdown. They're as much for me as they are for you. So there's no set pedagogy, there's no set learning structure. I'm showing you stuff that I might find interesting from a historical perspective, from a curriculum perspective, something I'm just exploring or experimenting with myself. So there's no hard teaching there. Hard teaching is done in a very personal way to students that you know. The videos that go out there are just for reference, just for interest, sometimes just for history, just to pass the time. When it comes to soft skills, it's important to shop around because there are many different people with many different perspectives, and you need those perspectives because in the soft skills market there are people that really focus on this as their main skill area, in the same way there are people that focus so much on the law and self-defense, escape and evasion, de-escalation, conflict management, and so on. There are lots of people that, as their subject matter expertise, focuses on that. I would say that whilst I'm quite good at that naturally and I have some training in that, they're not the areas that I have the most interest in getting across. I feel it's very important, and about a third of my classes that I teach face to face will be soft skilled orientated. But I'm willing to admit that it's not my favourite bit to do. It's not the fun bit to do because I still like to fight, I still like to spar, adrenaline test, do stuff. I'm still in that phase of enjoyment. And every instructor, everywhere around the world, will go through different phases of their preferred bit of things to teach. Soft skills for me is something I feel is necessary and important, and I will teach it, but importantly I will signpost to people that love it, that are immersed in it, that really live for it. And that's an important thing to do. Recognise what you're good at, what you know about, what you don't know about, and send people to the right places and the right people. Now, when it comes to soft skills, as a combatives community, as a self-protection community, we tend to take an awful lot of advice from police officers or former police officers, soldiers or former soldiers, or door people, bouncers or former bouncers. Now, there are some really great things about that, and they have practical, hands-on experience with real-world violence from a professional setting. They are experts in professional violence. But there's some other things about what you might get from those sources where you need to be consumer aware. Because if you are a police officer or a former police officer, your view of conflict might contain a bias of the fact that for much of your experience you would have had buddies. So you have people that are as trained as you and as equipped as you facing the job with you. So often you will have backup, skilled, aware backup. They will also be equipped in that they will have lethal and non-lethal weapons. They'll be trained in their usage and they'll have them. They'll have them on their kit belt, they'll have them in vehicles, they'll have them on standby. They can call in more of that type of support if they need to, which the average person does not have anywhere the access of. They don't have reliable trained friends and they don't have access to equipment. When you look at soldiers, it's very much the same thing. They very rarely operate alone. They operate with similar, often young, fit, strong, equipped, trained people. So their views and abilities in dealing with violence may often be influenced by that being their norm. Then you look at bouncers. Now bouncers, they've got a job to do. They're being paid to be professionally aware. So if you're minding a door, odds are you're not by yourself, or you shouldn't be by yourself. You will have had training. You'll have buddies that will likely be hard. You'll have people with you that should be able to fight, that should be tough guys. There's not a huge amount of bouncers out there that last very long if they're not tough. In the industry they call them jacket fillers, and they tend to fuck off pretty fast. So again, if you're taking soft skill advice from bouncing staff, bear in mind that their interactions with the public often, not always, but often, they are large, tall people. They're in positions of authority in what they wear. They're badged up, dark clothes. A lot of them even, a lot of them are in fluorescent jackets now, looking like they're police, looking like they're military. A lot of them are pretty geared up. So they're in positions of authority. They tend to be large, they tend to be confident, and they tend to be in groups. They don't tend to be drunk because their job is to be hyper-vigilant. So again, their experience of being able to pick up a threat at distance might be very much to do with the fact that they're being paid to pick up a threat at distance. They're being paid. It's their actual job to be looking through that audience, which is a level of awareness which many people will not and really will not access, will not harness, will not be able to deploy because they're living normal lives. Even an aware normal person will not have the same hypervigilance as someone whose job it is and is tasked to be scanning for threats, drug use, weapons, for it to kick off, unusually large groups of males. That's their job to do. So a lot of the advice from people on the circuit can sometimes be skewed from their background experiences in those areas, which is great. And you should take learnings from those people. Absolutely. There's some fantastic advice out there from those people. But also don't neglect other people in other skill sets from other areas. There's a couple where I'll speak from experience in. So before I do the work that I do now, I used to be a teacher. I used to teach religious studies, and I used to teach in what's known as a pupil referral unit, a PRU. So again, I used to teach people from 11 to 18, and these young people would often be heavily into drugs, gangs, weapons, violence. A lot of these kids are big, angry, becoming hardened, experienced criminals. So you've got to understand that these aren't just normal kids that are a bit gobby. These are stabbers, drug runners, arsonists, some of them rapists, nasty people. Some of them are nasty people. Some of them have had hard lives. Some of them just inherently wrong uns. And if you take any time working in pupil referral units, you can start to notice the difference between them. But as a teacher and working in a PRU and working with other teachers in that environment, there's a couple of things that you pick up. You've got to understand that as a teacher, you don't really have the ability to resort to violence in the way that a police officer or a bouncer could. So the end game of violence, you only have the same rights as an average citizen. So you have the right to defend yourself from being attacked, and that used to happen nearly every day. Teachers and other pupils would be attacked, sometimes armed, sometimes not, but that happens all the time in a pupil referral unit. But you don't have the same recourse or propensity or ability to deliver. And I say violence, that violence is a spectrum. Could be anything from, manhandling people, moving people through rooms, taking them to exits, all the way through to restraint, all the way through to full spectrum self-protection if you're really at risk. But what you do learn as a teacher, because you don't have that ready access to those approaches, you get a lot better at empathy, understanding where these young people are coming from, why they're upset, what is the real reason they're angry, how do we work around it. You get used to the notion that consistency is important, in that if you tell someone not to do something or a consequence will happen, you need to follow through. It's important to be consistent. Often there is no consistency in those people's lives. So when you say something, stand by it, mean it. Be an active listener. So by being an active listener, essentially, you're listening out for cues, words, sentences, stories that you can parrot back to convince them to do things you'd like them to do. It's no good just telling people to calm down. But if I've recalled from an earlier conversation something you might have said about your dad or your mum being poorly or your dog having died or whatever that may be, if I've been an active listener, I can deploy that mid-conversation and may be able to diffuse, which is very important. For a lot of these very, very angry, very violent, very capable young people, it's heavily ego-driven. So providing an opportunity for their ego, for their face, not to be damaged. So, again, give them a way out of a conflict. If the conflict starts to rise, if the aggression starts to rise between themselves or with you and them, you can give them ways out which doesn't make them feel like they're being dismissed or managed or that they've lost. So understanding people's ego and how important that reputation, that image is to them. So offer them an out that allows them to keep face. Understand how to crowd manage. So when you're a teacher in a unit like that, it can kick off with one pupil. It can kick off with more than one pupil. And often while you're in dialogue with one or two, you also need to be aware about the rest of the room. If you can win the room, you can win the verbal fight. If you can turn the room's perception. A lot of people like to watch an argument. A lot of people like to watch a fight. So if you can manage and control the room, if you can get the crowd to be with you by engaging with more than just the immediate threat, often you can return the pH balance of the conversation. You can take down some of the bile and the anger if you bring people on board with you. And make sure you can use humour effectively. Humour can de-escalate a huge number of things. So again, bear in mind that you can't be belittling, but you can also, if you can change things to be a bit more humorous, a bit more human, if you can make them see you as a human, that is really important. But again, consistency is key. You can't allow people to take the piss. So you have a line where this is the extent to which I'm going to allow affairs to take place, following which there are plans B, C, D, and E. But I'd say main things are, as a teacher, you learn a lot about empathy. You learn a lot about allowing the young people to save face. And you learn a lot about being an active listener, to listen out for those bits of data, those bits of influence that you can feed back to diffuse a situation. Crowd management is class management. And so again, learn from teachers, speak to teachers, especially teachers that are working in some of the rougher areas or working in pupil referral units or young offender institutions. They have a lot of valuable things to say because their recourse to violence is several steps further away than most doorman, policemen, bouncers. Other areas, so I spent some time as a teacher and I really enjoyed that time. And if the money was good, then I would still be in that career today. And I think you do need good attributes in these things to survive as a pupil referral unit teacher. Another one of the careers I had was working in care. Now again, this was not my passion, this was not my interest. Teaching was my passion, teaching was my interest. Caring industry, so I was working in essentially residential units for people with quite, what's the best way to phrase this? People on the autistic spectrum that could be extremely violent, non-verbal, unpredictable. There were other kind of learning difficulties in play too. A lot of kind of socio-economic factors. So a lot of these people from poorer backgrounds, often victims of abuse, and many of them were at different phases and stages of the autistic spectrum, and sometimes that made them very, 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 very violent indeed. That's not true of all people with autism. It is absolutely a spectrum, but the particular units that I was working with were for people that were likely to be very, very aggressive. And they were, in many instances, very, very aggressive, but not in a way that is predictable, like working in a youth offender institution or a pupil referral unit. It's a lot more unpredictable. And so some of the things I picked up from working in that is that body language is a key. Something really interesting is you see a lot of police officers, ex-police officers, calm down, calm down. No one in the history of calm down has calmed down because you've shouted calm down and presented an aggressive stop at them. You see a lot of people in Krav Maga do it today. Understanding your body language and how much your body language speaks is something that you can really pick up working with people in those types of environments, working in mental health. You can understand that sometimes people aren't picking up on the words, but they're picking up on the tone, how your face looks, how you're standing, where your hands are. They're picking up on your body language, your tone of voice, your eye movement. All that data's still coming in. So you get very, very good at managing your tone, your body language. You understand about giving people space and maintaining space because people are unpredictable. So you'd go from colouring in, reading a story, watching TV with someone who you'd feel is your, pretty much a mate in that environment. And then suddenly he's coming at you with a pair of scissors, or he wants to beat your brains in with a rolling pin. So if you don't maintain sufficient space, you can fall foul of those things. So again, learning about space, giving people space, learning about the power of your own body language, the power of your own tone of voice, that's very important for general self-protection. And you get very, very aware of and cognizant of people's medical conditions, the effect that certain drugs may have on those people, and for what sensitivities you might not have considered. So things that have been very traumatic, things that may have triggered PTSD with certain audiences, you might not have been aware of. A certain bang, a certain movement, opening or slamming a fridge, doing anything might trip people off. You might trigger their fight, flight, freeze response. So you get very, very sensitive and aware of what you do and how it affects others. So speaking to care professionals, doctors, nurses, psychologists, porters, people in hospitals, very, very good for self-protection too. Because again, like when you're teaching, your recourse to violence is many stages further back. So therefore, I think you get much better practiced at being calming, being understanding, being empathetic, and being able to manage people or persons. Another thing that you might want to consider, this is not so often talked about, is from teaching and from care, de-escalation, avoidance, diffusion skills, very, very important. Other skills that people don't tend to talk about is deterrence. So if you judge that actually the situation might be better shut down by being more of an active threat, seeming more capable, more aggressive, sometimes about dialing yourself down, sometimes about dialing yourself up. And I think people don't spend a huge amount of time understanding how to get to a stage of deterrence, how to walk in a way that deters people, how to wear clothes that deter people, how to stand, how to speak in a clear, strong, consistent tone of voice. So learning how to speak publicly, learning all you can about oratory, how to project confidence, is a great way to build your own deterrence. It's not about seeming mad or angry or thuggish, although you can deploy those tools too. It can also be just being able to be a good orator, being someone that speaks with calm, natural authority that makes people do or not do, as the case may be. Very important thing, invest in your own skills in public speaking. And finally, skills from salesmanship. So my current job is that I work in marketing and advertising. And a lot of that work, actually, many of the skills follow through. Because when you're selling, when you're marketing, it's objective-led. There's very much objective. I want you to buy something, click something, do something. It's very much the same in self-protection. I want you to walk away. I want you to put that weapon down. I want you to go call the police. You need to be able to get people to do things you want them to do. So what can you learn from salesmanship? Very importantly, if you follow the wisdom of straight line selling, don't allow people to go off topic. If I want you to go away, or if I want you to allow me to access the door, don't get caught in other conversations around other things. You were looking at my wife, you spilled my pint, you did this, you did that. Don't fight the small battles. Remember your objective. My objective is to get out the door. So keep the conversation flowing back to what you want people to do. In the same way that a good salesman, without feeling pushy, will drive you towards closing the deal. It's a very important skill to have, not allowing people to go off topic, keeping them there, and upsell better options. So when you're upselling better options, this could happen, or what we could do is I could buy you a pint, I'm going to go now get in my taxi and we'll just call it a night. I'm so sorry. Being able to sell people psychologically an interesting answer, a better solution, to upsell a better alternative for all parties is something that a good salesman should be able to do. And you can learn from people that are very good at sales. Also, if you're good at sales, you also need to know when the lead is dead. So you can get to a point in verbal de-escalation, diffusion, awareness, all those things. You come to a point where you need to understand that all my other options are exhausted. And so in that instance, a salesperson would know to end that conversation politely, but there's no real hope of recovering it at that point. So again, if you're taking some advice from salespeople, you've got to understand where it can get to a point where your verbal recourse or your ability to escape is now over. And you need to recognize when that is and know what to do next. But from teachers, from educators, from healthcare professionals, mental health, physical health, nursing, porters, and from people that work in sales, marketing, human behavior, and public speaking, these are three really good areas where you can draw many soft skill insights from places where you wouldn't normally get that data. So be very careful not to just take all of your sources from a small pool of people doing a small pool of professional jobs in that protection space, where people's core part of their job is to potentially resort to physical violence. That might be something that happens much earlier on than someone whose core job is to educate, to heal, or to convince. So broaden your sources, learn from many more people, and just enjoy the soft skills, throw yourself into it, and diversify your pools of information. Hope you've enjoyed.